Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, staring at the massive alien ship that had appeared in Earth's outer system 3 hours ago. The vessel was beautiful in a way that made his teeth ache, all flowing curves and crystalline, surfaces that caught starlight like captured rainbows. It was also pointing enough weapons at Earth to turn the planet into cosmic dust. "Any word from the diplomats yet?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer from the grim expression on Lieutenant Bobby Chen's face. "Nothing good, sir. The aliens are calling themselves the Zephyrian Empire. They want to talk, but only about our surrender." Jake rubbed his temples where a headache was building. Humanity had been dreaming of first contact for centuries, imagining peaceful exchanges of knowledge and culture. Instead, they got an ultimatum delivered in perfect English by beings who looked like they were carved from blue marble. Admiral Lisa Rodriguez entered the bridge, her usually calm demeanor showing cracks of stress. She had been in constant communication with Earth's leadership since the Zephyrian ship arrived. The news she brought was not encouraging. "They want 12 of our colony worlds," she announced without preamble. "New Montana, New Texas, Haven, and 9 others. If we refuse, they will take them by force according to something they call Galactic Law." "Galactic Law?" Jake repeated. "Since when do we follow alien laws?" "Since they have ships that can crack planets and we have maybe 50 vessels that could even scratch their paint," Lisa replied. "But there's more. They're not planning to just attack us. They want to settle this through what they call proper warfare." Bobby looked up from his station. "What does that mean exactly?" Lisa activated the main display, showing a recording of the alien communication. The Zephyrian ambassador was tall and elegant, with skin that shifted between different shades of blue. When it spoke, its voice carried an odd musical quality. According to the unified combat doctrine that has governed civilized warfare for 3,000 years, disputes between species are resolved through formal combat challenges. Humanity will select a champion to face our greatest warrior in single combat. The victor's species claims all disputed territory. Jake stared at the screen. "They want to settle a war with a duel?" "It gets stranger," Lisa continued. "They've provided us with detailed protocols. The combat must take place on neutral ground with representatives from the Galactic Council observing. Both fighters use equivalent weapons and armor. The fight continues until one surrenders or dies. And if we refuse, then they consider us barbarians and attack immediately with their full fleet." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Jake tried to wrap his mind around the concept. Humanity had fought wars for territory, resources, and ideology, but always with armies and fleets and strategies that involved more than 2 people hitting each other with swords. "Who would we even send?" Bobby asked quietly. Before Lisa could answer, the communications panel chimed. Dr. Amy Carter's voice came through, tight with excitement and fear. "Admiral, you need to see what I've discovered about these aliens. All of them." 10 minutes later, the senior staff gathered in the briefing room. Amy had been working non-stop since the Zephyrians arrived, analyzing everything from their ship design to their biological scans. Her findings were displayed on the room's main screen. "I've been studying the Zephyrian physiology and comparing it to the database they provided about other galactic species," Amy began. "Every single one of them evolved from prey animals. Herbivores, filter feeders, scavengers. Not one predator species in the entire galactic community." Jake leaned forward. "What does that mean for us?" "Predators and prey think differently at a fundamental level. Prey animals develop complex social structures and ritualized behaviors to avoid conflict. When they do fight, it's highly regulated and predictable. That's why they have these elaborate combat protocols." Lisa was beginning to understand. "And humans? We're predators. We evolved to hunt, to adapt, to find weaknesses and exploit them. The concept of fair fighting is something we invented relatively recently. For most of our history, the only rule was survival." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. "They're expecting us to fight like them." "Exactly. They've been having the same types of conflicts for thousands of years because every species thinks the same way. They can't imagine that we might approach warfare differently." Lisa stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. We need to choose our champion, someone who can represent humanity in this duel. I volunteer, came a voice from the doorway. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Blake entered the briefing room, his expression serious. Ryan was everything the military looked for in a special operations soldier, intelligent, adaptable, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. Ryan, this isn't a training exercise, Jake warned. If you lose, we lose 12 worlds and millions of people. And if I win by fighting their way, we buy ourselves time but learn nothing about how to deal with them long term, Ryan replied. But what if I don't fight their way? Amy looked intrigued. What do you mean? You said they expect predictable behavior, ritualized combat. What if I don't give them that? What if I fight like a human instead of like another prey species? The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. They were being forced to play a game with rules designed by aliens who had never encountered a species like humanity, but nothing said they had to play by those rules. Lisa turned back to the group. The duel is scheduled for tomorrow on Kepler 442b, a neutral moon in the border system. We have 18 hours to prepare. Jake nodded. Ryan, you're our champion, but understand that you're not just fighting for territory. You're introducing an entire galaxy to a new way of thinking about conflict. Ryan smiled, and for the first time since the aliens arrived, it wasn't entirely pleasant. Good. Maybe it's time they learned what it means to be hunted instead of being the hunters. As the meeting dispersed, Amy lingered behind with Lisa and Jake. There's something else, she said quietly. In all the galactic records they provided, there's no mention of any species that thinks like us. We're not just different from them, we're completely outside their understanding of how intelligent life develops. That could be our advantage, Lisa mused. Or our death sentence, Jake added. If we win this duel by being unpredictable, every species in the galaxy will know that humans don't follow their rules. That might make us enemies we're not prepared to face. Amy nodded. But if we lose by trying to be something we're not, we'll definitely face consequences we can't handle. Outside the ship, the alien vessel waited patiently, confident in its superiority and secure in the knowledge that tomorrow's duel would proceed exactly as such things had proceeded for millennia. They had no way of knowing that they were about to face something entirely new in their experience, a species that had evolved not to follow rules but to break them. The neutral moon of Kepler 442b was a dead rock orbiting a gas giant, chosen specifically because it had no strategic value to any species. A temporary arena had been constructed on its surface, complete with energy barriers to contain the combat, and observation platforms for the various alien delegates who had come to witness humanity's first formal duel. Ryan Blake stood in the preparation chamber, adjusting the unfamiliar armor that galactic protocol required. The suit was designed to be equivalent to what his opponent would wear, providing basic protection while allowing for full mobility. The weapon was a plasma blade, essentially a sword made of contained energy. Both fighters would have identical equipment. Through the chamber's viewport, he could see the arena floor. It was perfectly circular, made of some kind of crystalline material that would provide good footing and clear visibility for the observers. Everything about it screamed formality and tradition. Commander Jake Morrison entered the chamber, his face grim. The alien champion just arrived, General Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire. He's 9 feet tall and looks like he was carved out of a mountain. Ryan continued his equipment check. How does he move? Smoothly, confidently, like someone who has never lost a duel. Jake paused. Ryan, are you sure about this approach? We could still request that you follow standard galactic combat protocols and guarantee a loss against someone who has been training in those protocols for probably centuries? Ryan shook his head. No, we do this our way. Dr. Amy Carter's voice came through the comm system. Ryan, I've been analyzing the recordings of previous galactic duels. Every single one follows the same pattern. The fighters circle each other, test defenses, engage in formal exchanges of attacks, and the stronger or more skilled warrior wins through superior technique. Sounds boring, Ryan replied. It's predictable, which means Vextar will be expecting you to do the same thing. He'll have counters prepared for every standard attack pattern. Admiral Lisa Rodriguez joined Jake in the chamber. The observers are in position, representatives from 18 different species including the Galactic Council mediator. They're all expecting this to proceed according to established tradition. Ryan sealed his helmet and picked up the plasma blade. Then they're about to learn something new. The arena floor was larger than it had appeared from the preparation chamber. As Ryan walked toward the center, he could feel the weight of alien attention on him. The observation platforms were filled with beings that represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization, and they were all watching to see how humanity measured up to their standards. General Vexistar was already waiting in the center of the arena. The Zephyrian was indeed massive, his blue crystalline skin reflecting the arena's lights in patterns that probably had cultural significance. His movements were precise and controlled, speaking of decades of training and formal combat techniques. The Galactic Council mediator, a being that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a tree, announced the terms of the duel in a voice that somehow reached every corner of the arena without electronic amplification. Single combat, equivalent weapons, fight until surrender or death. Winner's species claims all disputed territory. Ryan and Vextar approached each other and stopped at the traditional distance. The Zephyrian general raised his plasma blade in what was clearly a formal salute. Ryan studied the movement, noting how it left the alien's left side exposed for a fraction of a second. Instead of returning the salute, Ryan attacked. The sudden assault caught Vextar completely off guard. He had been expecting the ritual exchanges that opened every formal duel, the careful positioning and testing of defenses that allowed both fighters to demonstrate their skill before the real combat began. Instead, he found himself desperately parrying a series of attacks that came from angles that made no tactical sense. Ryan fought like what he was, a predator that had identified prey. He used every dirty trick he had ever learned, every psychological technique that could give him an advantage. He feinted attacks and then struck from different directions. He used the arena's lighting to create shadows that concealed his movements. He even talked during the fight, a practice that was apparently unknown in galactic dueling. "Nice footwork," Ryan commented, as he forced Vextar to retreat. "Very traditional, very predictable." The Zephyrian general tried to regain control of the fight by falling back on his training. He attempted to establish proper distance and engage in the formal exchange patterns that he had mastered. But Ryan refused to cooperate with these efforts. When Vextar moved to the traditional attack position, Ryan wasn't where he was supposed to be. When the Zephyrian executed a perfect defensive sequence, Ryan's attack came from an angle that the sequence didn't cover. Every time Vextar tried to impose structure on the combat, Ryan dissolved that structure and created chaos. The observers watched in stunned silence. This wasn't how galactic duels worked. Combat was supposed to be a demonstration of skill and honor, not this wild and unpredictable violence. Several of the alien delegates were making notes, clearly disturbed by what they were witnessing. Captain Sarah Williams, observing from the UES Falcon in orbit, watched the duel feed with growing amazement. "He's not fighting the alien," she reported to Admiral Tony Harris. "He's hunting him." In the arena, the psychological pressure was beginning to tell on Vextar. He had been trained to fight opponents who shared his understanding of proper combat. This human seemed to have no understanding of honor or tradition. Worse, he was winning through methods that Vexistar had no defense against. Ryan pressed his advantage, driving the Zephyrian general back toward the arena wall. "You know what your problem is?" he asked conversationally while delivering a series of attacks that kept Vextar on the defensive. "You fight like prey." The words hit the alien, like a physical blow. In Zephyrian culture, being compared to prey was one of the deepest possible insults. Vextar's composure finally cracked and he launched into a berserker attack that abandoned all defensive considerations. It was exactly what Ryan had been waiting for. He sidestepped the wild charge and struck with precision, his plasma blade finding the gap in Vextar's armor at the shoulder joint. The Zephyrian general collapsed, his weapon clattering across the arena floor. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in galactic history, A formal duel had ended not with honor and dignity, but with one fighter lying defeated while the other stood over him like a predator over its prey. The Galactic Council mediator finally found its voice. The human champion is victorious. The terms of the duel are satisfied. But as Ryan walked off the arena floor, he could see in the alien observers' faces that something fundamental had changed. They had come expecting to witness another traditional duel, another confirmation of how civilized warfare should be conducted. Instead, they had seen a glimpse of something that challenged everything they believed about conflict and civilization. They had seen what happened when a predator species was forced to fight for survival, and in that moment Ryan realized that this duel had not ended a conflict. It had started something much larger. 6 months after the duel, the Zephyrian Empire made their decision. Ambassador Krell-Tan, speaking for the Imperial High Command, transmitted a message that reached every human colony simultaneously. The human victory was achieved through deception and dishonor. The unified combat doctrine has been violated. The Zephyrian Empire hereby declares the duel results invalid and claims the disputed territories by right of proper conquest. Captain Bobby Chen received the message while patrolling the outer edge of the new Montana system. His ship, the UES Defender, was one of only 3 vessels protecting the agricultural colony of 40,000 humans. Against the Zephyrian battle, fleet approaching his position, those ships might as well have been toy boats. "Sir, we're picking up massive energy signatures," reported Lieutenant Danny Foster from the sensor station. 67 Zephyrian warships, including at least 12 dreadnoughts. Bobby studied the tactical display with growing concern. The alien fleet was arranging itself in the traditional battle formation that every galactic species used, a grand line with the largest ships in the center and smaller vessels providing support from the flanks. It was an impressive sight, and according to every military manual in the galaxy, it was also the proper way to engage an enemy fleet. "They're sending a communication, sir," announced Ensign Kate Sullivan from the communication station. The main screen lit up with the image of a Zephyrian admiral. "Human vessels, you will withdraw to minimum safe distance while we establish proper battlefield parameters. Colonial evacuation will proceed according to galactic protocol, allowing 48 hours for non-combatant departure." Bobby looked at his small fleet and then at the colony below. 48 hours would not be enough time to evacuate everyone, and even if it was, where would they go? The other human colonies were just as vulnerable. "Sir?" Danny asked quietly. "Orders?" Bobby thought about Ryan Blake's victory in the duel, how he had won by refusing to fight according to alien expectations. Then he thought about Dr. Amy Carter's analysis of predator versus prey thinking. The Zephyrians expected him to either flee or arrange his ships in a proper defensive formation and wait for them to attack according to established protocols. All ships, emergency acceleration toward the Zephyrian fleet, attack pattern Gamma. "Sir, that's not a recognized galactic formation," Kate protested. "Good. Maybe that will confuse them." The 3 human ships accelerated directly toward the massive alien fleet, their weapons charging. It was exactly the opposite of what any civilized species would do when facing overwhelming odds. Standard protocol called for either immediate retreat or defensive positioning, while requesting terms for honorable surrender. Admiral Zekmar, commanding the Zephyrian fleet, watched the human approach with growing bewilderment. Why are they attacking? They must realize they cannot win. Perhaps they wish to die with honor, suggested his tactical officer. Then why are they not arranging themselves in proper formation? And why are they accelerating toward our strongest position? The answer became clear when the human ships reached weapons range. Instead of engaging the Zephyrian line where it was strongest, they dove through the formation at maximum speed, targeting the support vessels that were never supposed to face direct assault. The alien fleet's carefully arranged formation became a liability as the larger ships could not fire without hitting their own vessels. Bobby's ship punched through the Zephyrian rearguard, its weapons tearing into ships that had been designed for bombardment rather than close combat. The aliens had never encountered an enemy that would charge directly into a superior force, and their tactical doctrine had no counter for such apparently suicidal behavior. "Break formation and pursue," Admiral Zekmar ordered, but the carefully Drilled movements that made Zephyrian fleets so effective in traditional battles worked against them now. The ships could not redeploy quickly enough to catch the fast-moving human vessels. Danny Foster watched the tactical display with amazement. "Sir, they're trying to reform their battle line while we're still inside their formation. Half their ships can't fire because we're too close to their own vessels." "Then let's make sure we stay close," Bobby replied. "All ships target their command vessels. Make this personal." The Zephyrian fleet had been designed to fight other civilized species that respected proper engagement distances and formal battle procedures. They had never faced an enemy that treated their carefully maintained formation as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. Within 30 minutes, the human attack had damaged or destroyed 15 Zephyrian vessels and forced the rest to retreat beyond the system's edge. The aliens had superior numbers and technology, but they had been outmaneuvered by an enemy that refused to fight according to the rules they understood. On New Texas Colony, Major Kate Sullivan received word of Bobby Chen's victory, just as Zephyrian ground forces were beginning their assault on the main settlement. Like their fleet counterparts, the alien soldiers advanced in perfect formation, their movements coordinated and predictable. Kate had been studying guerrilla warfare tactics since the first contact with the Zephyrians. Human military history was full of examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones through unconventional methods, but such tactics were apparently unknown to galactic civilization. "All units fall back to secondary positions," she ordered through her comm system. "Let them have the settlement." The Zephyrian ground commander was pleased with the rapid human retreat. It confirmed his assessment that these primitive beings would crumble quickly when faced with proper military pressure. He deployed his forces throughout the settlement according to standard occupation protocols, establishing command posts and patrol routes that would ensure complete control of the area. What he did not expect was for the humans to return during the night. Kate's soldiers moved through the settlement like ghosts, striking at isolated patrols and supply convoys before melting back into the darkness. They used improvised explosives, sniper attacks, and psychological warfare tactics that kept the Zephyrian forces constantly on edge. The aliens had been trained to fight enemies that would meet them in open battle or surrender when faced with overwhelming force. They had no experience with an opponent that treated every building, every shadow, every civilian as a potential weapon against them. "Report to Imperial Command," the ground commander transmitted after 3 days of constant harassment. "Human forces are employing non-standard combat techniques. Request guidance on proper response to unconventional warfare." The response from Zephyrian High Command was telling. "Unknown terminology. Define unconventional warfare." That message was intercepted by human intelligence, and within hours, it was being analyzed by Dr. Helen Brooks, Earth's leading expert on galactic military history. Her findings confirmed what humanity was beginning to suspect. "They literally have no concept of irregular warfare," she reported to Admiral Lisa Rodriguez. "For 3,000 years, every conflict has been resolved through the same basic methods: stand-up fights between organized forces, formal siege warfare, or single combat between champions. The idea of asymmetric tactics is completely outside their experience." Lisa studied the reports from New Montana and New Texas with growing understanding. "So when we don't fight according to their rules, they don't know how to respond. It's like they're playing chess and we just flip the board over." Across human space, other colonies were reporting similar results. Every time Zephyrian forces encountered human defenders who refused to fight conventionally, the aliens found themselves at a disadvantage despite their superior technology and numbers. But the most significant development was happening at the Galactic Council Station, where Ambassador Peter Walsh was facing a tribunal of alien representatives. They were demanding an explanation for humanity's violation of civilized warfare standards. "You must understand," the council mediator explained, "the unified combat doctrine exists to prevent conflicts from becoming chaotic and destructive. When species abandon proper military protocols, the result is barbarism." Peter looked around the chamber at the assembled alien delegates. Beings from dozens of worlds, all of whom had evolved from prey species, all of whom shared the same fundamental assumptions about how conflicts should be resolved. "With respect," he replied, "humanity never agreed to your combat doctrine. We're not abandoning your protocols. We're using our own. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in galactic history, a species was openly rejecting the basic framework that held their civilization together. And somewhere in the back of every alien mind, an uncomfortable thought was beginning to form. If humans could ignore the rules of warfare, what other rules might they choose to ignore? The first crack in the galactic order appeared 6 weeks after humanity's unconventional victories against the Zephyrian Empire. It came from an unexpected source, the Cathara Collective, a species of insectoid beings that had been considered the weakest military power in known space for over 1,000 years. Commander Alice Turner was serving as a military advisor on the Kithra homeworld when the revolution began. She had been assigned to help them develop better defensive strategies against potential Zephyrian expansion, but what she discovered was far more significant than anyone had expected. Your problem isn't lack of courage or equipment, she explained to Swarm Leader Zakth during one of their strategy sessions. Your problem is that you're trying to fight like everyone else, instead of fighting like yourselves. The Cathara had always been dismissed by other galactic species because their natural behaviors seemed unsuitable for civilized warfare. They moved in unpredictable swarms, communicated through chemical signals that other species couldn't intercept, and had an instinctive tendency to scatter when faced with superior force. But the combat doctrine requires organized formations and coordinated attacks, Zakth protested, his translator converting his chemical communications into audible speech. The combat doctrine was written by species that think like your traditional enemies, Alice replied. What if you ignore it completely? The opportunity to test this approach came when a Zephyrian patrol fleet entered Kythera space, expecting to face the usual ineffective resistance that the insectoids had always provided. Instead, they encountered something that changed the balance of power in an entire sector. The Kythera ships didn't form battle lines or attempt to match the Zephyrian formation. Instead, they scattered like a disturbed hive, each vessel moving independently while remaining connected through their chemical communication network. To outside observers, it looked like chaos. To the Zephyrians, it was a nightmare. Their targeting systems had been designed to track organized formations, not individual vessels moving in apparently random patterns. Their tactical doctrine assumed enemies would concentrate their forces for maximum impact, not spread them across thousands of cubic kilometers of space. When the Cathara attacked, they did so from dozens of directions simultaneously, their small ships darting in to strike before retreating back into the swarm. The Zephyrian fleet found itself surrounded by enemies that appeared and disappeared faster than their weapons could track. Within 2 hours, the Zephyrian patrol was destroyed or scattered, and word of the impossible victory spread throughout galactic space. The weakest military power in the galaxy had just defeated one of the strongest by abandoning everything that civilized warfare represented. Similar revolutions were beginning across the galaxy. The Vorthan Republic, inspired by reports of human and Cathara successes, started experimenting with their own natural advantages. Their crystalline biology allowed them to rapidly reshape their molecular structure, an ability that had been considered useless in traditional combat. Captain Nathan Price, serving as a human liaison to the Vorthan military, watched in amazement as Vorthan soldiers demonstrated their new tactics. They can literally change their shape during battle, he reported to Earth Command. Imagine fighting an enemy who can become a wall one moment and a weapon the next. The Vorthons had discovered that their shape-changing abilities made them perfect for guerrilla warfare. They could disguise themselves as terrain features, infiltrate enemy positions by mimicking their equipment, and launch attacks from angles that no conventional force could defend against. But the most significant change was happening within the Galactic Council itself. Species that had accepted their place in the established hierarchy for millennia were suddenly questioning why they had to fight according to rules that favored their enemies. General Steve Martinez, commanding the Human Expeditionary Force, received reports from across the galaxy that painted a picture of unprecedented upheaval. It's not just military tactics, he explained to Admiral Kevin Thompson during their strategy meeting. The entire social order is starting to crack. Kevin studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. How long before this spreads? To species that might see us as the cause of their problems? The answer came sooner than expected. The Corvan hegemony, a militaristic species that had built their entire culture around mastery of traditional warfare, declared humanity a threat to galactic stability. Unlike the Zephyrians, who had stumbled into conflict with humans, the Corvans began preparing for war deliberately. They're mobilizing their entire military, reported Dr. Chris Anderson from his position at the Galactic Monitoring Station. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon they have. They believe that if they can crush humanity using overwhelming force and traditional tactics, they can restore order to the galaxy. Admiral Carol Bryant, commanding the main human defense fleet, studied the intelligence reports with professional interest. The Corvan hegemony possessed the largest conventional military in known space, with battle fleets that had remained undefeated for over 2 centuries. "How many ships are we looking at?" she asked her intelligence officer. 3,000 capital ships, 12,000 support vessels, and approximately 50 million soldiers across all branches of their military. They're treating this as an existential threat to their entire civilization. Carol nodded slowly. They're right to be concerned. The question is whether they understand what they're really facing. The Corvan strategy was simple. Concentrate overwhelming force against human positions and crush resistance before the new tactical doctrines could spread further. They would prove that traditional military power, properly applied, could overcome any unconventional approach. It was exactly the kind of thinking that had made them powerful within the old galactic order, and exactly the kind of thinking that would destroy them in the new one. The first engagement came at the Battle of Rigel 7th, where Admiral Kevin Thompson commanded a mixed human-alien task force against the Corvan advance guard. His fleet included ships from 6 different species, all of them trained in the new adaptive warfare doctrines that humanity had introduced. The Corvan commander, Marshal Gravok, approached the battle with complete confidence. His force outnumbered the defenders 5-1, and his ships were arranged in the perfect battle formation that had brought victory for 2 centuries. What he encountered was unlike anything in Corvan military experience. The defending fleet didn't form a battle line or attempt to match his formation. Instead, the various species fought according to their own natural advantages, creating a chaotic mix of tactics that defied conventional analysis. Human ships used hit-and-run tactics while Cathara vessels swarmed through the Corvan formation. Fourth-hand ships appeared as asteroids until they suddenly transformed into weapons platforms. Even species that had remained neutral in previous conflicts joined the battle, each contributing their own unique approach to warfare. The Corvan fleet, designed to fight enemies that followed predictable patterns, found itself facing opponents that seemed to change the rules of engagement with every passing moment. Their carefully planned formations became liabilities as they struggled to adapt to threats they had never encountered. When the battle ended 8 hours later, the Corvan advance guard had been completely destroyed, while the defending fleet had lost less than 20% of its ships. More importantly, the engagement had been broadcast throughout galactic space, showing every species what was possible when they abandoned the limitations of traditional warfare. Marshal Gravok's final transmission before his flagship was destroyed captured the full scope of what was happening. They don't fight like soldiers. They don't fight like any civilized species. They fight like... The transmission cut off before he could finish, but everyone who heard it understood what he had been trying to say. They fought like predators in a galaxy that had forgotten what predators were capable of. And across thousands of star systems, species that had been prey for millennia began to remember what it felt like to hunt. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on Nexus Prime exactly 1 year after humanity's first contact with galactic civilization. The massive space station, which had been the center of peaceful governance for 3 millennia, now felt more like a war room as representatives from hundreds of species gathered to address what they called the human crisis. Representative Julie Martinez walked into the council chamber, knowing that she carried the future of human galactic relations on her shoulders. Around her, alien delegates whispered in dozens of languages about the chaos that had spread across their formerly ordered galaxy. The council mediator, its ancient form showing signs of stress that few had seen in centuries, called for order. We gather to address the fundamental threat to galactic stability posed by human military doctrines, and their spread to other species. Julie stood to address the assembly, but instead of the apologetic tone that many expected, her voice carried quiet confidence. Honored delegates, humanity did not come to your galaxy seeking conflict. We were forced into war by species that demanded our surrender. Everything that has followed has been the natural result of that decision. A Zephyrian delegate rose from his position. Natural? You call the abandonment of 3,000 years of civilized warfare natural? Your tactics have destroyed the foundation of galactic order. Our tactics have revealed the weakness of that foundation, Julie replied calmly. A system that cannot adapt to new challenges was never as stable as you believed. Before the debate could continue, Dr. Chris Anderson's voice came through the emergency communication system. Council delegates, we have a priority transmission from the Galactic Rim. Long-range sensors have detected an approaching fleet of unknown origin. The main display activated, showing sensor readings that sent a chill through every being in the chamber. Hundreds of massive ships were approaching from intergalactic space, their design unlike anything in the known galaxy. Their energy signatures suggested technology that made even the most advanced galactic civilizations look primitive. The Devourers, whispered an ancient delegate from the Xerian archive. The legends spoke of them, but we thought they were myth. Julie felt her blood run cold as additional information appeared on the display. The approaching fleet had consumed 12 galaxies over the past million years, leaving nothing but empty space behind. Their ships were not just weapons of war. They were cosmic predators that fed on entire civilizations. How long until they reach our galaxy? The council mediator asked. 6 months, Dr. Anderson replied. And based on their approach vector, they'll hit the outer rim colonies first. The chamber erupted in panic as delegates realized that their ancient enemy was not another galactic species, but something that threatened their entire universe. Traditional military doctrine had no answer for opponents that consumed galaxies. Admiral Carol Bryant's image appeared on a secondary display, transmitting from the outer rim where she had been observing the approaching threat. Council delegates, I've been analyzing the Devourer fleet composition and tactics based on long-range scans. They don't follow any recognizable military doctrine. What do you mean? Asked a Corvin representative. They don't form battle lines. They don't establish supply chains. And they don't seem to have any command structure that we can identify. They move like a living organism, adapting to whatever resistance they encounter. Julie saw the understanding dawn on faces throughout the chamber. The Devourers fought exactly like the species that had been terrorizing the galaxy for the past year. They adapted, they evolved, and they treated every engagement as a hunt rather than a formal battle. The traditional galactic response to the Devourers has always been the same, the ancient Xerian delegate continued. Form the Grand Alliance, combine all military forces under unified command, and meet them in decisive battle. And how has that worked out? Julie asked quietly. The silence that followed was answer enough. 12 galaxies had tried the traditional approach, and 12 galaxies had been consumed. Captain Nathan Price's voice came through the communication system from his position at the Outer Rim monitoring station. Council delegates were picking up transmissions from the Devourer fleet. They're not communications in any language we recognize, but the pattern analysis suggests they're coordinating their approach based on our defensive preparations. They're studying us, Admiral Carol Bryant added. Just like any predator studies its prey before attacking. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. The enemy approaching their galaxy was not just another military force to be defeated through superior tactics or technology. It was something that had evolved to hunt and consume entire civilizations. Traditional galactic military doctrine will not work against this threat, Julie said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. The Devourers have faced that approach 11 times before, and they've developed counters for every strategy you might employ. A Vorthan delegate spoke up hesitantly. Then what do you propose? We propose that the galaxy learns to think like predators instead of prey, Julie replied. Every species here has natural advantages that have been suppressed by the need to conform to traditional warfare. Against the Devourers, those unique abilities might be the only thing that saves us. Dr. Amy Carter's analysis appeared on the main display, showing biological assessments of the approaching threat. The Devourers appear to be a collective organism, possibly evolved from a species that consumed their own home galaxy. They've encountered 12 different galactic civilizations, and each time they've adapted to overcome whatever resistance they faced, but they've never encountered anything like what this galaxy has become, Admiral Carol Bryant added. They're expecting to face organized resistance based on traditional military doctrine. Instead, they're going to encounter chaos. The debate that followed lasted for 18 hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The old galactic order had failed to protect against the ultimate threat, while the new chaos that humanity had introduced might represent their only hope for survival. The vote was finally called. It was unanimous. The Unified Combat Doctrine was officially dissolved, and the new Galactic Defense Initiative was established with humanity as its coordinating species. Admiral Carol Bryant was given command of the combined galactic fleet, but instead of organizing it according to traditional principles, she scattered the various species throughout the galaxy according to their natural advantages. The Cathara would provide early warning through their swarm networks. The Vorthons would infiltrate Devourer positions using their shape-changing abilities. Even the Zephyrians would contribute their technological superiority, but deployed in ways that had never been attempted before. The final battle began 3 months later, not at a single point but across hundreds of star systems simultaneously. The Devourers, expecting to face the traditional Grand Alliance formation that had failed 11 times before, instead encountered a galaxy that fought like a living organism. Every species contributed their unique abilities to a defense that adapted and evolved with each engagement. When the Devourers countered one strategy, 3 new approaches appeared from directions they had never encountered. The galaxy had become what humanity had always been, a predator that refused to be prey. The Devourer fleet, for the first time in their million-year history, found themselves outmatched. They had evolved to consume galaxies that followed predictable patterns, but this galaxy had learned to think like hunters instead of victims. When the last Devourer ship fled back toward intergalactic space, the galaxy had been saved not by superior technology or greater numbers, but by the simple recognition that survival sometimes required abandoning the rules that had once seemed sacred. The new Galactic Defense Initiative established its headquarters on Earth, and Representative Julie Martinez became its first director. The age of ritualized warfare was over, replaced by something far more dangerous and far more effective. The age of adaptive survival. Humanity had not just rewritten the rules of war, they had taught an entire galaxy how to evolve beyond the limitations that had nearly led to their extinction. And in the vast emptiness of space, other galaxies that still followed the old ways began to detect strange signals from a region that had suddenly gone silent after hosting the Devourer fleet. For the first time in their history,